Greetings, dear friends. Today we want to go further in our understanding of our spiritual authority in this physical body. The more we're acquainted with the spiritual dimension, the less likely we are to be distracted by the things in the external realm. And if you think about it, that's really what happened in the very first earth. You remember that when God created man, He gave him the authority over everything in this physical dimension. But he was a spiritual being. This flesh that covered his body was not his consciousness. His consciousness was of God, because God blew Himself into man through His nostrils. And we've spoken about this many times. But in this message today, I want to revisit what happened when that earth was destroyed by water. And you see in this little diagram how man was basically the whole composite of the planet. He was the earth. It was His domain. And His consciousness, which was God, was what created everything beautiful. When God formed this planet and the universe, He said everything was good. And when He put man there, it was perfect. But when man decided something outside himself was more valuable and looked like it could bring him more wisdom than God gave him, he destroyed this world. And as we said many times, what you believe is your world. The earth is physical, but what we think about, what we believe, creates the world that we operate in. And I'll give you an example of that if you think about a placebo. The world is basically our placebo. A placebo is an inert substance, water, sugar pill, anything that does not produce a reaction physically is considered a placebo when it's given to a group of people trying to test a certain drug that the pharmaceutical companies want to use. Belief is a lot like being pregnant. You either are or you're not. There's no middle of the road when you're pregnant, and that's what belief is. So when you make a decision to believe something, you've already accepted, believed, and surrendered to that thought, whatever it is, because your reality is determined by your belief. So they use that mentality to examine the drugs and everything in life, actually. Because if it's real, you're going to respond to it. But is it real because of the drug, or is it real because of your belief? And that's what placebos show. Your body, once you believe it, will reproduce the chemistry that the drug produces when you take it. Because you've accepted it, you've surrendered to it, and therefore you believe that image of your healing, or whatever it is you're taking it for, is going to manifest in your life. Now, this is how people live. Our whole life is a placebo if we're determined to judge what we see, what we believe to be real. And that's what made the life of Christ so exemplary, so absolutely fascinating. Because He didn't choose to believe what He saw. He chose to believe what He heard. Look at that scripture in John 5:30. I can of myself do nothing. As I hear, I judge. And my judgment is righteous, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of the Father who sent me. And Jesus says in Matthew 7:1, judge not. So here is why the placebo responds to our belief. We make a judgment that what we believe is going to make us whatever it is the pill is supposed to do. It's going to give us health. It's going to change some physical condition in our body. So we've made that judgment because we've heard a doctor or someone tell you that this is going to change your life. And you accept that and you believe it. And then you surrender to that word that you heard because you haven't seen any results. You've heard it and immediately you begin to imagine what that pill is going to do for your physical condition. That's how we live in this physical world. Jesus didn't operate that way. He heard what his Father said, which was spiritual, and his body responded to what he heard because he believed his Father. That is the spiritual connection that we're designed to receive once we are reborn into the condition of the first earth. So when man chose to believe the external for his physical condition, this world that he had created was destroyed. How was it destroyed? In Genesis 7:11, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up and the windows of heaven were opened. Now think about that. On the days of creation, when God was creating the earth, the whole planet was covered in water. And he began to change the water from the physical to the clouds to the different dimensions. Everything was water. Everything was hydrogen. And we've spoken about the importance of hydrogen in other messages. So everything on this physical planet was hydrogen and carbon. So when God used Noah to divide and break up this earth from the water, he was doing what? He was changing the whole physical structure and the spiritual structure of this system. So the first earth, which was encapsulated, it was like a universe that was encapsulated just for man and all of his offspring to live in this dynamic condition, because the earth was what? It was watered from the ground up. You remember that? In chapter 2 of Genesis? Before any plant of the field was in the earth, and before any herb of the field had grown, for the Lord had not caused it to rain on the earth, and there is no man to till the ground, but a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. So this whole cosmos that man was living in was being taken care of, not from external, but from internal. Listen to that. Everything was done inside. Everything was provided on the inside. And man was getting his instructions from the inside. This was the design. And this is how we are to live. We are to be instructed from our internal spiritual connection. But when man decided that he wanted something externally, God had to give him what he wanted. So he changed this whole dimension. That's when this earth was destroyed, and everything now was set up so that now man immediately starts to look for his provision and everything in the external. So now he is ruled by what he sees and believes, not what he heard and believes. So all of his senses now are activated to receive what he needs from the external. And we saw that in Genesis 7:11, and Jesus comes, and he says in John 4, Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up to everlasting life." So Jesus came to return what happened when this fountain was broken. Internally, spiritually, where you can now totally rely on your internal operation between you and the Father, Nothing external has to change your life anymore. You're no longer bound by what happened after the first earth was destroyed. You're now brought back into that first creation, the last Adam. You're now connected because that's what Jesus did. John 3:16, that God so loved the world that he gave his only son. He wasn't talking about that event in the earth when Jesus was walking the earth. He was talking about that happened before the earth was even created. Because this was not something that surprised God. Before you became flesh, you witnessed this whole ordeal in the physical dimension because you're spirit. And deep inside you, you know that you know what is right, what is wrong, and how to live, because all of the instructions were given to you in your spirit before you became flesh. And those who recognize that and understand that are not distracted by the things of this physical realm. You're living with a knowledge and a knowing that goes beyond what you're being told externally and all the noise that's in the external realm. That has to be your daily bread. That has to be something that you're so comfortable with. And that's why we give you these lessons, and that's why we teach you, so that you can remind yourself that you already know what it is to live in the spiritual dimension. You're already acquainted with that. And in reality, you never left that position in the spirit. This physical life you're living is determined by how much emotional attachment you have given to the physical realm. And that's what separated Adam and Eve, because they were emotionally attached to what they heard the serpent tell them. So they broke that connection with God. So we've just seen how the first earth is actually heaven and earth combined. It is both spirit and matter. And why is that important? Because we understood that when you come from the spiritual realm into the physical realm, physics calls that collapsing a wave function. That's what all of the physics and computers and all are trying to understand. How does that take place? How can you make something that you can't see, feel, taste, or touch appear? So they've come up with this virtual reality. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So man could manifest immediately what he believed in the first earth. So that dimension was broken and the second earth was created, and it became the duality realm. That's where we're living physically today. Right, wrong, and the foundation of that is fear of death, because that's the foundation of this world. And remember, earth and world are not the same. So man was birthed into the second earth with this foundation of the world, which is the fear of death. So all of his thoughts, all of the emotions that he has are filtered through this foundation, because that's how everyone is taught. And when you go through the Bible and you see all the different things that happened throughout the ages, you see it was the result of people seeing through the lens of the fear of death. And that's how they're captured, that's how they're entangled with the problems and the chaos that's in the earth, because of that belief and that fear. Remember, the placebo that we just explained is the example of how a person is conditioned. So when you're born into this earth, you're conditioned to believe that your life is determined by what you can get, not by what you have. And that is the first step to losing your authority as a spirit being. Replay what I just said so you can get it. Now, what Jesus did as the Son of God, as God, was to come back to the earth and show man how to be reborn into the first earth, through the Spirit and the water. And we understand, and we've been teaching about this over and over again, how that new birth replaces us spiritually in that first earth. We choose every day when we awake to eat from the tree of everlasting life. And when you do that, you don't have a yesterday, you don't have a tomorrow. You have eternity right in this present moment. You're not waiting for anything. You're living in it. I've said in previous messages that right now is as good as it will ever be in your life. Because right now is all you're given. And it's sufficient. It is sufficient. Your physical body is not your mind. Your physical body doesn't control your life unless you accept, believe, and surrender to it. Your life becomes the placebo, and the drug is your belief. Say it again. Your life is your placebo, because it's the world that you've created from your acceptance, belief, and surrender to it. And the drug is the living Christ who came to set you free. That is the reality of who you are. People want to take drugs, people want to have medicine, and they believe that that's going to change their physical condition. The only thing that's going to change your physical condition is your acceptance, belief, and surrender to what Christ did. That's the real drug. And that will change how you think, how you believe, and what you say. Because this is not who you are. Touch your body. Say, this is not who I am. This is not who I am. Those feelings that I'm so focused on, that's not who I am. This physical manifestation that I spend 99% of my time focused on is not who I am. Who I am is the living Son of God. That's who you are. And I think secretly all of us know that. Secretly we know that we are greater than we can imagine. But our imaginations have been corrupted and constructed from the physical reactions that we've had that's produced these emotional traumas in people's lives. So what happens, they begin to perceive their life through those traumas, and they surrender to those beliefs. They surrender to that chemistry that creates that rush or that feeling. Listen, when you start to change, you're going to look crazy to your friends, because you're not going to want to be a victim. You're not going to want to be predictable. And the people that you have surrounding you either love you or they don't. And the ones that are offended by you not being predictable, they never loved you in the first place. The ones that want to take a ride with you, even though you're not predictable to them, they're the ones that love you. And the people that walk away from you today, they'll come back to you a year later and say, what you did for me by changing who you were, changed my life. And you can count on it, because God will never allow anything you touch for Him to be despised. He tells you, if you give up your life for my name, for my sake, even though you don't even have to tell anybody why, you will not lose it. So when you lose that emotional bond and commitment you make to the friends around you because they want to be able to validate their condition, that's going to upset them. That's going to make them uneasy because they can't predict your behavior. And if they can't predict your behavior, it makes them nervous and uneasy. But that's all right, because your validation does not depend on how people treat you. It's how you hear the word from the Holy Spirit. And that doesn't need to be shared with anybody but you. Man is now starting to create a new answer for God's new birth. And it's called the Metaverse. And you're going to be hearing about this in the months to come. Many of you probably already heard about it. But the Metaverse is this virtual reality that's called Internet 3.0 by many people. And what that is now you can put on these physical attachments for gloves and goggles and go into a realm that's totally make-believe. You're going to be hearing about it. In fact, Facebook just changed their name from Facebook to Meta, which is the prefix before Metaverse. Let me tell you what the word meta means. In physics, it means beyond or after. In the Hebrew, it means dead. So when people start talking about the Metaverse, they're talking about a dimension where you aren't alive physically. You are an imagination that you've created to live inside this virtual reality so that you can conduct your life totally the way you want to. Lawless. You can be whoever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do. It depends on you. How is that different than how you're living now? How is that different than how God created man in the first place? The difference is it's only a temporary solution for the problems people are running away from. They want to escape the pain, the problems, all of the things that they don't want to take responsibility for creating. And you and I both know that the reality of what Christ did at resurrection created our universe, our world, to live in total harmony with God and man the way he was created. You have to choose to accept, believe, and surrender to that knowledge. And then do not allow your body to change that condition. Because trust me, your body will cry out and want some kind of satisfaction or want some kind of distraction every time you want to stay present. How many of you experienced that? Whenever you're trying to be present, your body will demand the attention. That's what you have to drag it back like an animal to break. You have to make it conform to that peace that passes understanding. Because you've spent all your life learning how to navigate and manipulate the realm around you. We all know how to do that. But I'm telling you now, the more you stay in his presence, and the more you stay conscious of that presence, the less attraction you have for the physical. And you have to understand that by experience. You can't just take my word for it. Those of you who have not been to our website, we have a diffuser that I want you to go and check it out, because I think it'll be something that'll help you stay focused in the present moment. The nebulizing diffuser that we're offering to you will change the physical atmosphere so that your spiritual nature can be very accustomed to that garden that man was put in the beginning. So until next time, I send you great love and many blessings.